So this is one in a number of incredible illustrations and pictures in Revelation. This may be one of my favorite pictures, if not my favorite picture in Revelation. There's a lot of great ones. And it's typified, we're in chapter 17 of Revelation, the NIV has a statement. There's a nameplate on the head of the prostitute. And the nameplate in NIV has it just like this: Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and the abominations of the earth. It's a clarifying chapter. I think it's a chapter that when you look at this and you look at the chapters preceding this, I think come into more focus. It explains some things. It kind of puts a wrapper around the last, well, really since the letters. Before we dive into it, do y'all remember we had a homework assignment last week? Anybody remember the homework assignment? In the seventh bowl at the end of chapter 16, there was a discussion about, in 19, it said, the great city was split into three parts, and the city of nations fell, and God remembered Babylon the Great. So I had inserted that was talking about Rome. Dan countered, he thought it was Jerusalem, and I looked in scripture, and I looked in the notes just as we're standing here and kind of referenced both things. So the homework assignment was to find out what that great city was referring to. Did anybody happen to do that? Does anybody have an opinion? Okay.
I have an opinion.
Well, give us your opinion.
It's a factuality.
Okay. Yeah, you got to turn the camera. Let's hear what this factuality is.
My research shows that.
You're on the fly research?
Yes,
Really?
on the fly research. It shows that it was Babylon. The city was Babylon, but it was more than a city. It was also a state of mind that existed at the time. And in reference back to chapter 14, verse 8, it indicates that Babylon was the name of both an evil city and an immoral empire. And it was a world center for idol worship. And they ransacked Jerusalem and carried off its people of Judah. You can read that in 2 Kings 24 and 2 Chronicles 36. And Babylon was the Jews' worst enemy. And the Roman Empire was the worst enemy of the early Christians. So I think that's where some of the discussion comes in. And John, who probably didn't dare to speak against Rome openly at that time, applied the name Babylon to this enemy of God's people, Rome, and by extension to all God's enemies of all time. So
that is a factuality. That is the answer, I think.
I mean, that's what the majority of people interprets this as.
Yeah, I agree. And so I looked at it, and it's exactly what you said, and it's amazing how you could come up with that kind of analysis and critical thinking.
It took some time.
No, it's true. So Babylon was clearly a metaphor for Rome. Rome, Babylon, Sodom, Egypt, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is also thrown in there. So all of those things that were against God's way, against Christ, were kind of thrown into this stew of Babylon the Great. And so that's part of what's clarifying about this. It's not just clarifying about this question from last week, but it's clarifying about everything. Rome, I don't know, is Rome used? I guess Rome is used in Revelation, but I don't think it's used in the disparaging ways that Babylon and Egypt and Sodom and others are used. That's where it's referring.
If it would have, the chances are this probably would have never gotten from the island to somewhere else.
Exactly. I agree. All right. So in in chapter 11:8 of Revelation, it's talking about, it says the great city is Jerusalem, Babylon, and Rome. In 14:8, it's Babylon. Ken's interpretation is very specifically latter-day Babylon, which, depending on where the latter-day period is, if it's now, who knows? But there's certainly a lot of bad empire states out there now, including ours. Quite frankly, it could be Rome if it's referring to that time. So, so diving into 17, it's really interesting. Ever since I've been a child, and I'm sure everyone has had the same thing, as you've watched the corrosive influence of evil pervade our society. And when I was a kid, the Rockford Files was as risque as it came because they used the D word every now and then, right? I mean, it was just clean. Kids could watch it, and the only thing that was a little objectionable was it was intense, and somebody getting shot, falling dead with no blood. And so we've just gradually watched, time and time again, slowly the frog is being boiled very slowly. Y'all know that metaphor? Mm-hmm. Frog slowly being boiled, and so we've complained about it. We've complained about a government that's now become very much opposed to Christianity. And this particular government, I mean, this government is, just in our government, is, look at what they're now doing. You're now forcing Christian organizations to offer abortions. They're at any cost, more paramount than anything else is that contraception is fine, but now it's the government paying for contraception under any circumstances. 13-year-old girls, by law, being able to have abortions without telling their parents, but can't have aspirin without telling their parents in some states. So you got this amoral government. It's not even amoral. It's more. It's got an agenda. It's more. It's got a morale. It's just a different moral. And antagonistic media, right? I mean, it's aside from very few outlets, it's the main media is not very sympathetic to Christianity and Christians. Completely immoral entertainment industry. I mean, there's some people in it. They're great people, but as an industry, it's just complete amoral. And the university system. And I don't know how it is at SUNO, but academia is very much riddled with a very certain ideology, and so you got this kind of trifecta or quadfecta of major forces that are just eroding society, and they're working together. The power of the government working with the communication of media and entertainment, with intelligentsia, academia, turning out people with a certain perspective that supports that mindset, that view. And we complain about it and think, boy, it's just never been so bad. How can we have gotten that way? Well, chapter 17 and everything preceding tells you exactly that that's what's happening. It's there, it's predicted, and it's been going on since the beginning of Christian time. So let's look at, somebody read 17, 1 through 6.
One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute, who sits on many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a desert. There I saw a woman sitting in a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet, and was glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. This title was written on her forehead: Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus.
So that's the illustration. And as only the angel and John could do, they answer this in the following passages. Specifically, John marveled, and the angel said, "Don't marvel. I'll tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast and the 7 heads and the 10 horns and the bottomless pit. I'll tell you all this." And the explanation is just as mysterious as the original illustration. So let's talk about this. So one of the 7 angels, 7 bowls. So we're still in the 7th bowl. Said to me, "I'll show you the judgment of the great prostitute." And again, so this is not an individual person, obviously. It's obvious throughout the whole passage, but it's not an individual person. It's the spirit of the world and the influences that are weaving through the world and people who aren't Christians, weaving through to just form this force of animosity toward Christ. I mean, you feel it every day. If you're not a Christian, there's animosity toward Christ, and it's animosity. All those things that I mentioned, it's a continuous feeling and work of Satan to oppose God and to oppose Christ. So the good news is there's a judgment. I mean, we complain about it and we sit around and say, yeah, there's got to be a better way. Well, a better way is that there's judgment coming, and the better way is Christ. So the prostitute seated on many waters, that one is typically the world, people who are not Christians, is what pretty much all the interpretations I've seen. So she's this great prostitute, this great influence of evil, sitting on the sea of people who are following her, who are mesmerized by her, who are mesmerized by sexual immorality, and I mean that is really a driving force, and that's a driving force in our society now, right? I mean we all see that. It's just this in the secular world, boy, it's all about sex. Sex sells, and so she's seated on them. With the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers of the earth have become drunk. So just this kind of symbolic influence of idolatrous behavior. Certainly the kings of the earth, just referring to the powers, all the powers of the earth, the leaders, the rulers, the power structure of the earth is certainly in line with this force that's against Christ. And I saw coming out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. Whoops, I'm on that. I suddenly moved to the wrong chapter. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. So scarlet beast referring to, well, we had 2 beasts, remember, we had the beast of the land and beast of the sea. And the beast of the land, the beast of the sea, I'm sorry, was the first one that was revealed. And what was that one? You remember that? It was very much aligned with the dragon. The dragon was Satan. And so there's certainly a relationship. The beast of the sea was the Antichrist, the spirit of the Antichrist. The Antichrists, however you interpret it, it's really irrelevant, whether it's one person or spirit of people. So the scarlet beast being red, associating again with Satan, and blasphemous names, blaspheming against who? What is blasphemous?
Against Christ.
Against Christ, against God. You blaspheme against God, so it's not just bad names and horrible names, but it's blasphemous names. And blasphemous names probably referring to worshiping of idols, and worshiping of the state, and worshiping of sex, and the things that are, putting those as God, as first rather than God. That's, God is a jealous God. And when people worship these things of the world, then that's blasphemous. And 7 heads and 10 horns. We'll come back to that in a second. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with the gold and jewels. So gold and jewels, the world's luxuries perhaps. Just this, so it's sex and idols and luxurious lifestyles, and just the chasing of gold and jewels and influence. Holding her head a golden cup full of abominations and impurities of sexual immorality. So read, if you will, somebody read Jeremiah 51:7. I have Jeremiah 51:7 written down, but that doesn't strike me as that maybe right.
It
Yeah.
says Babylon was a golden cup in the Lord's hand, making all the earth drunken. The nations drank of her wine, therefore the nations went mad.
Yep, and so it's again a very complete comparison passage to Revelation. Read it again, Kevin. So we're talking about, Jeremiah is prophesying about Babylon at the time, and the time Babylon was the major influence in the world, and it was it an empire of God, chasing after God? What was Babylon like?
It was very evil, very self-absorbed, very
Self-absorbed.
proud, boastful, and arrogant.
And wealthy,
Oh, very well,
pagan.
very much.
Yep. Sexual immorality probably just rampant through the place. So this is God's prophecy about Babylon. Read it
Read it
again.
again? Okay. Babylon was a golden cup in the Lord's hand, making all the earth drunken. The nations drank of her wine, therefore the nations went mad.
Yeah. So again, very very similar comparison. All right. And then comes the forehead. On the forehead, there was a common view at the time that ancient prostitutes in the Roman Empire, they were identified by, anybody know? There's a headband with their name embossed. This was what a lot of historians, thank you. Historians would say is that they would have, that's how you identify them, just put the name on. And so, kind of an interesting comparison. This is the name that's up there. Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and the abominations of the earth. That's quite a name. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. So again, referring back to the blood of the saints, remember the blood of the saints, where was it being pooled?
To the altar.
Under the sacrificial altar from chapter 6 or 7. And so here we get into the interpretation. This is where the angel starts providing some interpretation for us. Not an easy interpretation. Somebody read through chapter 8, through verse 8, so 7 and 8.
When I saw her, I marveled greatly. But the angel said to me, why do you marvel? I tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on the earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come.
Okay. And then after that, he says, this calls for a mind with wisdom. So now we've got a image, an explanation, and then a call to have wisdom to interpret the interpretation. So I'm not sure we are wise at all enough to do this. I'm not sure we have the mind of wisdom to deal with this. But let's try. So, the mystery of the woman, the beast with the 7 heads and 7 horns who carries her. Okay, the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise. I had to read that and refer many times to that. Was and is not and is. What's that referring to? Just grammatically.
It was alive, died,
prophetically.
came back.
That's exactly right. So, and it's
Wait,
sort of
what
like
did
the,
you say?
Alive, died, came back.
Oh,
or some,
It's, you
yeah,
know, like,
or
it's,
something was, but there is not anymore, but it will be again in the future. So it's sort of like the time and times and time and a half, or half a time. I'm sorry, times and time and times and half a time. It's a really interesting and intricate way to describe something pretty straightforward. So here he says, the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit. The bottomless pit being, we talked about that before, essentially hell. I mean, it's going straight from the bottom of hell. And the call from Christ, where's it going from the bottomless pit? It's going straight from hell, from hell, I guess, back to hell, right? But through destruction. It's going to be destroyed. So, who is the beast that was and is not and is about to rise? Suggestions? So there are a couple of interpretations. One is kind of in line with when we talked about this before. Because remember, we had a similar passage where it could be that, remember Nero killed himself, committed suicide in 64 AD, and some interpretations are that the Christians of that time would view this persecution that started with Christ's ascension, basically this persecution was, and then when Nero died, it stopped. They thought it was over, and then it picked up again under Domitian and his father. So that's one potential one. I think most of them I see, including Ken's, is it's a much broader implication, really related to Satan had dominion over the earth, then that dominion was broken by Christ. That's right, Christ's blood. And so forever there is salvation through Christ's blood. So he doesn't have total dominion, but that dominion, what it says, not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit. But he is going to come back and make a final push. There's going to be this final great battle, maybe a spiritual battle, but that Satan make one last rise when he comes out of the pit. But that he's going to destruction pretty quickly. It'll be a short-lived thing. So those are the two big interpretations. And then the 7. Let's see. The 7 heads and 10 horns that carry her. 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. This is now in verse 9. This is where we have to the mind of wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. There are multiple interpretations there. Anybody familiar with any of the interpretations?
Well, Rome is 7 hills.
Rome has 7 hills, so it could be a direct reference to Rome. There's one that's probably less related to that specific time period. Is 7. I'm sorry. What did we say? The 7 heads or 7 mountains. So mountain was also often in prophetic writings of Scripture referring to kingdoms, empires. And so in that scenario, the seven empires could be 7 empires since the let's see, what were they? From the first emperor, Augustus, through Domitian. So it's Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Galba, Othelio. Oops, it starts breaking down. So maybe it's the 7 great ones, because there were some of these were more minor, but that's one of the interpretations, that it was those 7. But there's really 12.
Roman kingdom?
Roman kings,
Oh, Roman kings.
Yeah,
Roman kings.
emperors.
Uh-huh.
So that's one interpretation. One interpretation. It could be great empires that oppose God, so maybe that's Babylon, Assyria, Persia, Greece, Egypt, perhaps. And when you continue on, it says, these are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. So it could be that, just what we said. That was 5. 5 have fallen, they're already in the past. 1 is, meaning it's currently existing, that's Rome, and the other is yet to come. Makes the mind race. Who is that? And when he does come, he must remain for only a little while. So, who knows? The broader interpretation, from Ken and other interpreters, is that it is just a statement of the kingdoms. It's the broader interpretation of kingdoms that are aligned, empires that are aligned against God for all time, and that they will fall. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th. It's an 8th beast. We talked about 7 beasts, right? So there are 7 beasts, or 7. We talked about 7 kingdoms, 7 empires potentially. So this is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7th, and it also goes into destruction. So 7 kingdoms, 7 empires, 7 beasts, but there's also an 8th that belongs to the 7th. Who knows what that means? And it really doesn't matter. And the 10 horns that you saw, tell you what, why don't somebody else read that? Somebody read 12 to 14.
The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and with him will be called chosen and faithful followers.
All right, so we don't really have any idea. There's all kinds of speculations about what those 10 are. But we have 10 lesser kingdoms, lesser powers, lesser influences, 10 smaller countries, 10, who knows what. And there are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power. So they're at this time of this writing, they were waiting in the wings, but they're to receive authority as kings for 1 hour. And 1 hour, I think it's really 1 hour.
A short time.
A short time. And so but remember, as we talk about all these images and illustrations and time periods, they're almost always, in fact, they are always just a symbol, an analogy. 1 hour just means a short period of time. And as we get into a couple of chapters from now, just remember, there's a lot of time periods, and they're mostly figurative. But they're to receive, together with the beast, these are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. So, whoever that is, whatever powers, whatever kingdoms, countries, governments, they are in line with the beast, and they're subjecting themselves to the beast, and they will allow themselves to be aligned with and what's the beast again? not specifically the devil. It's more
Antichrist?
specifically the Antichrist, the spirit of Antichrist. And so that's why we start looking at these and looking at Antichrist and how it's placed so many times in different contexts, in multiple contexts. You know, I think there's a real valid interpretation for the Antichrist not being a specific person who rises up and takes over the United Nations as it's popularized in movies. You know, it's this spirit that manifests and supports, you know, the henchmen of the devil, but it's more than one henchman. And they'll make war on the Lamb, and what does the Lamb do?
Overcome them.
Overcomes. The Lamb will conquer, because he's the Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And those with him, with him, who are those with him who will conquer?
His faithful followers.
That's right. And called and chosen and faithful. And there we can get in a whole discussion again about Calvinism, but we're not going to. All right, and at 15, and then this is sort of the culmination of it. And the angel said to me, I'll read this, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are the peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. So again, like I said before, it's the people who are following them. But again, talking about this imagery, it's not just a people. It's the people. It's the nations. It's the languages. It's all of the societal structures that are coalescing and working together to work against the cause of Christ. And the 10 horns that you saw, they're the beast. They and the beast will hate the prostitute. And this one's really interesting. They'll hate the prostitute. They'll make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. Why? For God has put into their hearts to carry out his purpose. That's really interesting. So you've got the great prostitute is this great influence, this horrible influence. And then the 10 horns, so these kingdoms, these powers, are going to align with the beast, the Antichrist, and they will hate the prostitute together. So let me see, I have let me read. Can somebody find Ezekiel 16, 39 through 41? I think this is the comparison.
Ezekiel 39?
Yes, sir. No, I'm sorry, Ezekiel 16, 39 through 41.
Then I will hand you over to your lovers, and they will tear down.
Yeah, this is it.
Then I will hand you over to your lovers, and they will tear down your mounts and destroy your lofty shrines. They will strip you of your clothes and take your fine jewelry and leave you naked and bare. They will bring a mob against you, who will stone you and hack you to pieces with their swords. They will burn down your houses and inflict punishment on you in the sight of many women. I will put a stop to your prostitution, and you will no longer pay your lovers.
So here in Ezekiel, God is talking to, anybody know who he's talking to? Who he's,
Judah.
that's right, Jerusalem specifically. That's right, he's talking to Jerusalem. And he says, calls her a prostitute. Same deal. So I'm going to back up a little bit more. I'm going to go to 35. Therefore, O prostitute, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of God, because your lust was poured out and your nakedness uncovered in your whorings with your lovers and with all your abominable idols, and because of the blood of your children that you gave to them, therefore, behold, I will gather all your lovers with whom you took pleasure, and those you loved, and all those you hated. I will gather them against you from every side, and will uncover your nakedness to them, that they may see all your nakedness. And I will judge you as women who commit adultery and shed blood and are judged, and bring upon you the blood of wrath of jealousy. Again, God is a jealous God. And I will give you into their hands, and they shall throw down your vaulted chamber and break you down your lofty places. They shall strip you of your clothes and take your beauty and jewels and leave you naked and bare. They shall bring up a crowd against you, and they shall stone you and cut you in pieces with their swords, and they shall burn your houses and execute judgments upon you in the sight of many women. I will make you stop playing the whore, and you shall also give payment no more. So I will satisfy my wrath on you, and my jealousy shall depart from you. I will be calm, and will no more be angry, because you have not remembered the days of your youth, but have enraged me with all these things. Therefore, behold, I have returned your deeds upon you, declares the Lord. Wow, isn't that interesting? Very similar, right? God used not his people, he used the people of Jerusalem, the people who were in concert with him to help destroy Jerusalem. God used evil influences. God used Babylon, Syria, to execute his wrath. And so he's doing that again in Revelation. Now, some interpretations will look at that and say that this is referring to military powers, that there's these great military powers will rise up against the cities and against the powers, and that's where the wrath will be executed. I don't know. I don't see that, but I don't know that it really matters. Just God says that she will be devoured and burned up with fire, and that God is using his enemies for his purpose. And then in the last verse, and the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. So again, the great city, we've already talked about that. It's all of them. It's everything together. It's all the evil cities. It is pretty interesting. One of the references I was looking at was talking about, it may have been Ken's actually. They were talking about just the cities being the heart of iniquity, the heart of sin, and that the contrast between the country living and city living. That's where all the sin, debauchery is occurring. That's where the hearts of, or the seats of anti-Christian activities are occurring in the cities and not out. It's just an interesting illustration that I hadn't really thought about. So God's judgment is coming. The next chapter is specifically I think the next two chapters basically are celebrations about the fall of Babylon. So we've been building up to this crescendo, and the last couple of verses of 17 say Babylon's conquered, defeated, goes to the bottomless pit for destruction. And then there's rejoicing and celebration because Babylon is dead. There's rejoicing in heaven. And then we go to the 1,000 years in chapter 20, which is probably perhaps the most controversial, one of the most, I shouldn't say controversial, interpreted in a way that is debated a lot. I don't know, it's controversy, it's just a significant debate about what that means. And then the new heaven and the new earth. And so we've got, the new Jerusalem arises, and it's just a great picture of God's conquest. So, any questions, thoughts?
The irony is that most of the world is moving into cities, and we're getting these mega cities all over the place. People are living the all. So this is very timely, because if the city is the focus of this war or this conflict, then people are gravitating towards that. Mainly, like places like China are stopping people from moving to cities.
Oh, are
So if
they?
you live in Nubian, 4 or 5 cities, and like Nigeria has a city with 30 million people. One
That's
city.
amazing.
How do you go in a city with 30 million people?
It's amazing.
And there are many, many of them where the rural areas are abandoned. Everybody just, and there are no holes barred. Everything goes.
Yeah,
So this is very timely.
it's very interesting. Very interesting when you look at cities, just in general. I mean, I like cities. I was more of a city slicker, but I don't like what goes on in cities for sure. Okay.
You know, it's very interesting as you study Islam and you